Okay, good afternoon, Year 5. This is your RE lesson. So remember, we're doing Understanding Christianity, and we are about here in our big story. So this is the creation, when God created the earth and made everything perfect. The fall was when the apple was eaten, and then here we are in kind of a confusing time and people are struggling to find their way and follow God. So our topic is people of God, and our big question this term is how can following God bring freedom and justice? So today we're going to be looking at Moses' life, parts 5, 6, 7 and 8. So just have a think, what have you already learnt about Moses? So pause the video, what did we do last lesson? Okay, so hopefully you can remember that we learnt that in Egypt there were a lot of Israeli slaves, and we learnt about the first part of Moses' life when he was in a basket and the Pharaoh's daughter took him in, and at the time, remember, the Pharaoh didn't want any Israeli boys to survive. Then the second bit of his story was when he kills the taskmaster who was beating up a slave whilst making the pyramids. The third bit of his story was him fleeing Egypt, so that's him there. And then the final bit of the story was Moses and the burning bush. So he became a shepherd after he fled Egypt, and he had an encounter with God, and God basically told him that you need to go back to Egypt and you need to set my people free. Okay, so that's the point that we are at. So, next event is number 5, and it's the 10 plagues. Okay, and plagues are things that aren't very nice and that kill. Okay, so we're going to watch up until plague 8. To find my internet, it is this one, and it's this one.
After meeting with the Israelites to let them know that God had heard their cries and was coming to their rescue, Moses and Aaron delivered God's message to Pharaoh. "Let my people go." But Pharaoh refused because God had hardened his heart. Instead of showing mercy, Pharaoh was cruel and made the work and lives of the Hebrew slaves even more difficult than before. The showdown was at hand between God and Pharaoh. Who was the true king? Who was all-powerful? Whose command could not be ignored? God told Moses not to fear, but instead prepare to witness his mighty power as he forced Pharaoh to let his people go. The next morning, Moses again came to Pharaoh, and again Pharaoh refused to let the Hebrew people go. So, at the Lord's command, Moses told Aaron to stretch his staff over the Nile River, and the waters turned to blood, causing the fish to die and the waters to become undrinkable.
Aaron's his
But
brother.
Pharaoh's heart hardened further. So God sent a second plague. This time, frogs covered every inch of the land. This became so unbearable that Pharaoh begged Moses and Aaron to make this plague stop. The morning of the following day, Moses returned to Pharaoh and commanded him to let God's people go. And again, Pharaoh refused. God had Aaron strike the dust with his staff, and gnats swarmed the land, covering both people and animals. When Moses came to Pharaoh again the next day, Pharaoh again refused Moses' request to let the people go. In response, God sent a fourth plague, flies. Like a black cloud, flies covered every part of Egypt, except where the Hebrew slaves lived, spoiling the land and entering every Egyptian's house, including Pharaoh's palace. Once again, Pharaoh pleaded with Moses and Aaron to end this plague. God sent Moses to Pharaoh again, but Pharaoh still refused to listen to God. The next day, God sent a severe plague upon the Egyptians that killed their donkeys, camels, herds, and flocks. This hardened Pharaoh's heart even more against God. Again, God sent Moses to Pharaoh. When Pharaoh refused God's command yet again, Moses threw soot into the air, and it became dust that covered the land of Egypt, causing all the people in Egypt to break out into painful sores. Pharaoh's heart, hardened by God, made it so he continued to disobey God's command to let the Hebrew people go. God told Moses to go back to Pharaoh and warn him that the coming plagues would be much more destructive and harsh than the last. But Pharaoh still wouldn't listen. When Moses stretched his hand toward heaven, God sent a hailstorm unlike any that had ever been seen before in the land. It destroyed plants and homes and killed animals and people. Pharaoh confessed that he was wrong, but again his heart hardened, and he rejected God's command. Then God sent a plague of locusts. These insects covered the land and devoured the last remaining plants and trees in Egypt, leaving the once lush farmland surrounding the Nile a barren desert wasteland.
Okay, so that was up until plague 8. Let me just find where I put my RE here. So, in class, we would have done a conscience alley, so we would have been acting out how you were feeling. However, we can't do that in school. So, what I want you to do is I want you to pick, so you're going to do one for Moses and one for Pharaoh. So, I would like you to pick a side. So, you either have to pick that Moses should continue following God or that Moses should give up. Okay, and I want you to give a reason why he should give up and why he should continue, so you can write a sentence there. Okay, so pause the video and have a go at giving Moses reasons why he should continue following God or give up. Okay, so hopefully you said things like lots of innocent Egyptians are getting hurt, the land is being ruined, so you should give up. And then maybe for reasons to continue, you've got so far, you're so close, you need to do as God asks you to, you need to keep going to save your people. Okay? Right, so I want you to do the same with Pharaoh. So I'd like you to give or write a sentence or give reasons why he should keep the Hebrews as slaves, and then I want you to give reasons why he should grant them his freedom. Okay, so I'd like you to write some sentences there. Why you should give up and give them to God, or why you should continue and not give in. So pause the video and have a go. Okay, so again, hopefully you had reasons for him keeping the slaves. Maybe again, he's got so far, he's put up with so many plagues, he should continue. And then reasons to give up is that obviously the plagues are getting worse and worse and his people are suffering as well. Okay, so that was number 5, so the plagues. So the number 6 was when he was leading the children out of Israel. At first, the Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites leave. Then God unleashed 10 plagues on the Egyptians. It was the 10th plague, the plague of the firstborn, which eventually persuaded the Pharaoh to let them go. So let's have a watch.
Pharaoh was still unwilling to release God's people, so at Moses stretched his hand up to the sky, and a heavy darkness swallowed Egypt. For 3 days, no Egyptian saw another person or left their house. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron so he could try to make a deal to end the plague of darkness. Pharaoh said everyone could go to worship the Lord if all the Hebrew people left their flocks and herds behind. When Moses and Aaron refused this offer, Pharaoh commanded them never to come back, or they would be killed. With the people still enslaved, God told Moses there would be one final plague, a plague so severe Pharaoh would have no choice but to free God's people. God told Moses that throughout the land of Egypt, every firstborn boy would die. God told Moses to tell the Hebrews to cover the doorposts of their homes with the blood of a lamb, and God would pass over their homes. At midnight, the firstborn sons in every Egyptian household died, including Pharaoh's own son. From the lowliest of servants to Pharaoh's palace, there was no home in Egypt untouched by death. This plague so devastated the land of Egypt that Pharaoh commanded God's people to leave. The Hebrews, who had been in slavery for generations, had been set free.
Okay. So people put the blood of a lamb killed in sacrifice above their door, and these are the origins of the Jewish festival of Passover. Okay, so this resulted in the people being freed. So the final bit that we're going to look at is the crossing of the Red or the Reed Sea. Okay, so all these plagues have happened and causing a lot of devastating effects, and finally the people have been freed, but they need to make their way out of Egypt. Okay, let's have a look together. So their people walked out of Egypt with all the belongings that they could take. And that's Moses. So the Pharaoh was angry and sent his troops to retrieve them. So the Hebrews are trapped between the Pharaoh's army and a sea. So God let them pass safely through the Red Sea. Okay. So that is going to be the end of our lesson. If you wanted to do any more work on that, you could maybe write down some adjectives about how the Hebrew people were feeling before the Red Sea was parted, during and after if you wanted to, or you could draw a storyboard if you like to, but you don't have to because normally in lesson we would be acting it out, wouldn't we, and doing some drama, but obviously can't do that at home. So yeah, so hopefully you can now, explain. Let me have a look. You should be able to explain Moses in the basket, the taskmaster in fleeing Egypt, the burning bush, the 10 plagues, Passover, and the crossing of the Red Sea. Okay, right, well done.